Does the world need another browser? We have two or three installed on our laptops and phones. What's the vision here?
So 80% of the time we spend on our desktop, laptop computers, we are in our browsers. So for all intents and purposes, we see the browser as an operating system for work, and a lot of consumer tasks as well. But for this audience, I'd love to focus on those knowledge worker use cases. And one way we like to think about the history of the internet is for the first 30 years of the internet, we already had AI. We had very advanced machine learning systems. It was just purely on the supply side. It was Google had it in AdWords, Netflix had it in its recommender systems. Instagram and Facebook had it in their feed systems. And so you had this very lopsided ecosystem where you had very advanced AI coming out of big companies, and then consumers and knowledge workers were effectively being manipulated by these systems. And part of what we see our mission and purpose at Perplexity is to level the playing field. It's to give the consumer, to give the enterprise knowledge worker the same powerful AI and technology that's kind of, working against them in some way or another in the information battlefield. And so that's a long way to say is that the opportunity we see in the browser is to actually build a tool that puts the user front and center, and to be your sidekick as you are browsing the internet. Um, all of the data, all of the information that you can access through your browser, we want your Comet agent to be able to access that for you and to be able to do that with infinite time, compute, and memory. Um, and the other companies in the space, they're not aligned with the user in the way we are, and so that's where we see a big opening. The browser has not been reimagined in a long time, really since Chrome first came out and was very fast, and that was a big breakthrough. But now we see this amazing opportunity to actually have a browser that works for you, and is aligned with you against the internet.
Very interesting. So, what form does it take? So, I've been playing with Comet, and since morning we've been talking about agents and multi-agent architectures and agents moving into production. Do you think people will have their own agents that they will run inside of Comet, or does Comet become my personal assistant at home and in the office?
I think we already have the primitive version of that running in Comet today. So you can you can have Comet loaded up, and as long as you're logged into all of the SaaS products and tools you use every day in the browser, you can ask a question in Comet that takes data from one of those tabs, combines it with data from another tab, and then outputs all of that into a Google Sheet. And so really, the mental model is anything you can do in your browser, we can do for you as well. Again, with kind of infinite compute memory and speed.
Thank you. Very interesting. So I think now we are in the browser war situation, but let's go back to the search engine. You position Perplexity as a knowledge engine for everyone. And as kind of AI models and your competitors are growing over time, how do you see the search and retrieval market? What do you think happens in next 2 to 3 years? Or I guess far into the future in next 6 months, given how fast things are moving.
So our mission is to serve the world's curiosity, which may sound somewhat frou-frou, but I would challenge this group with the idea that the most critical skill for a knowledge worker in the near and medium term future is the ability to ask good questions. That is what's going to differentiate mid-tier performers from exceptional performers, and really like good questions in the most comprehensive sense of that. A good question requires having context on all the available data that could have informed that question. It requires understanding what is the problem space, what is the opportunity space. It requires having an innate curiosity, a desire just to learn and be provocative. And so there is no company in the search space that is actually motivated by satisfying that curiosity the way we are. And one of the core technical investments we've made is building search infrastructure, index, ranking, and retrieval system that is purpose built for the AI age. Everything we've done has been optimized to have the search outputs be consumed not directly by a human, but by an AI system. And so it is, that's given us the early edge, and we've really refined that, and have a data flywheel running. And the kind of space we want to be in, and what we think knowledge workers deserve, is accurate AI. AI is going to become increasingly more powerful. It's going to become more intelligent, and those are great things. The thing that becomes very scarce is trust. What is the AI product? What is the AI solution that you trust? And that trust is really a function of several things. One is transparency. That's why the first major kind of innovation that Perplexity pioneered and others have borrowed is showing the sources. So having citations actually appear before you even see the answer. There's obviously building a ranking system that is focused on accuracy. And then there's business model and incentive alignment. We're not motivated by getting our users to click on links that lead to a commercial transaction. That's not how we get paid. And so we're always, our core metric is queries per day and retention. And so if we're not serving our users, that shows up, and that motivates us to build accurate AI.
That's helpful. Thank you. Before continuing, I guess I want to go back to your background. You've been very successful at picking the right companies at the right time, whether it's LinkedIn, Uber. How is this different? And is it similar in some ways as well to those experiences?
Yeah. So I also happened, was at Facebook back when it was 500 employees and 80 million users. I, I mean, I think a very obvious pattern match for a consumer internet product is if you yourself get addicted to it, then you would kind of extrapolate that others will as well. And so I started my addiction with Perplexity in the summer of 2023, and just felt myself wanting to ask more and more questions. Um, and that's kind of it was analogous to the mental model with Uber, where if you were thinking about Uber's market cap as how big a chunk of the taxi market could Uber get, that's not going to be $100 billion company. But if you think about it as like what's all the need for personal transportation, obviously the history has written itself, and I think that what became obvious to me is that Perplexity was much bigger than search. It was about human curiosity, right? Which is a massive TAM that really, in some ways, is unbounded. So I was personally addicted. Uh, I also became convinced that whether it be Perplexity or somebody else, uh, we were going to change how we consume information, going from links to answers. The future of the internet is going to not run on us clicking on links. It's not going to rely on agents clicking on links. That behavior at some point is just going to again, I'm not making a specific timeline prediction. I just can't imagine links being relevant in the future the same way they have been in the past. And so there's definitely going to be a reason for there to be a shift from Google's monopoly potentially kind of losing its strength. And then the third factor was I saw in our CEO Aravind, an incredible young CEO who had I got to work with many amazing CEOs, but incredible capacity to learn, which again with asking questions alongside asking questions, learning is kind of I think the key skill for the future, and so those three things made it a great bet.
Incredible. Well, thank you. Well, you talked about trust. You talk about knowledge workers, accurate AI. Those are really the top of mind for CISOs and CIOs right now in enterprise situation. Founders are moving at light of speed, speed of light, and then enterprises are not moving that fast. So, what are the specific use cases where Perplexity can be beneficial to the CIOs in the room today across different verticals and horizontals?
I mean, ultimately, this comes back to just productivity, right? This is about making sure that in the hours in the day that your teams are engaged with work, that they're creating the most value. Um, and I think there's a lot of I'll kind of share an example from how we run Perplexity that is somewhat counterintuitive. Uh, the types of work that are easy to automate with AI uh, themselves just become work products that will become less relevant. And so within Perplexity, we never make decks. Like for internal purposes, we do not have a culture of ever producing long documents or presentations. Because we know ourselves that it's trivially easy to do with an AI tool. And it's kind of this almost theater of work rather than actual work. Like actual work is looking at data, asking the right questions, and coming up with a new hypothesis. And that's we actively use Slack channels, and we have a lot of self-serve data tools, and we encourage kind of asking of questions and then having meetings where instead of somebody presenting, it's just a series of back and forth questions. So I think, you know, being successful in AI adoption and transformation, uh, table stakes is having the right tools. I'm not going to turn this into a pitch for why Perplexity is a good tool, but the reality is Perplexity is already being used as shadow IT by most senior executives I meet. And it's just a sometimes slower than we would like process of moving that into not shadow IT, but that process is well under its way. The thing to keep top of mind is not just like procurement of tools, but how do you create a culture where people are taking advantage of these tools, where they're not using these. Like to me, the saddest thing that I see when I'm on airplanes is I see somebody has a AI chat app open and they're using it to draft emails to send to their colleagues, because you're effectively using AI to create more work for somebody else to then consume all that expanded text rather than refining the core idea that you're trying to communicate and writing a shorter email. And so that's actually like the fail case with AI is like it makes it easier to engage in the theatrics of work rather than focusing on the real work. The real work is, once you understand a use case for your enterprise, how do you have a culture of rapidly disseminating that? How do you reward your employees that are the best at identifying those and sharing it, and not just having that be an AI working group? That's everyone's job. The number one piece of advice I give to folks is like cancel your AI committees, cancel your AI cross-functional steering groups, whatever you call it. Everyone's job is to be figuring this out. And if you delegate a small chunk of the company, that means everybody else is off the hook.
Quite interesting. You talk about shadow IT, and we had a conversation about shadow apps earlier this morning. And is part of the reason that some enterprises are not switching yet is because they're bought into Google and Microsoft ecosystems. And for those people, what's your advice? How can they bring Perplexity into the mix?
I mean, pretty much everybody I know that works for a large organization has access to Microsoft Copilot, and no one I know who has access to it uses it. And I've eagerly await the person that will kind of inform me that I'm wrong on that point. Um, what I say is like it's not just about access to the tools, it's about having tools that are easy to use and that your employees actually want to use, because the procurement is like the easy part. It's the culture of adoption, it's the ease of adoption, where the differentiation comes from.
Thank you. Um, One more question. This is more around the underlying models themselves. There's been discussion around Perplexity depending on other model providers, and then you add a layer of intelligence on the top. Do you see any risk to the business from that? How are you going to mitigate that as Perplexity grows and takes on Google, for example, in the future?
Yeah. How many of the folks in this room own their own data center? Okay, a few, but most of you don't. And that's, I think, the right mental model when it comes to thinking about foundation models. Ultimately, um, we haven't seen any indication that there is a singular breakout model. These models, you know, are for all intents and purposes, they're improving, but they are a commodity. And we will be consuming them the same way that we consume cloud services. And so we certainly, we compete obviously with some of the same companies that we then use APIs to access their models, but not one of those companies has ever cut off their access to us. In fact, they want us using more and more of their APIs. Um, and structurally, the reason it's very unlikely a singular model breaks out is this concept of distillation, which I imagine most folks in this room know about. But basically, anytime there is a slightly better new model, every other model runs, thousands, millions of queries against the new model and uses the outputs from it to refine their own model. And whatever is that incremental improvement, it then goes to those other models. And that's why you don't see you see these models kind of moving up the benchmarks, which is another kind of tricky thing to track because those benchmarks are saturated. But they move up in unison, and that's really a function of distillation. So we don't really see structural or kind of structural, both from a technology and an economic indicator, that access to the best models will get cut off.